Lab 1, Properties of Aggregates. Part 1 is the sieve analysis. Please make sure you have all the necessary safety equipment before starting the lab as outlined in the laboratory manual. Start by weighing each empty sieve and recording the weight. Ensure that the sieves are arranged in decreasing order from top to bottom. Next, measure a sample of approximately 2,000 grams. The sample should be washed aggregate as well as oven dry. There should be no moisture in the aggregate. Place the sieves in the sieve shaker and pour the weighed sample into the sieves. Ensure that the sieves are securely fastened prior to starting the shaker. The sieves need to be in the shaker for a period of 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, take the sieves out of the shaker. Record the weight of the sieve with the material retained in it. The weight of the retained material can be calculated by subtracting the weight of the sieve as recorded prior to shaking. The sieve analysis test is used to determine the grading of aggregate materials that will be used in concrete and asphalt paving. It ensures that particle size distribution complies with applicable requirements and provides the data necessary to control the material containing aggregates. Part 2, Bulk Density of Aggregate. First, determine the weight of your measure, WM, and record it. Next, fill the measure completely full with water and determine the weight of measure and water. Any water that is spilled on the scale must be wiped off prior to weighing the aggregate. Make sure the measure is completely full with water, and ensure all excess water is wiped off prior to weighing. Place a thermometer in the measure and obtain a temperature. Ensure the thermometer is left in the measure for a sufficient time to obtain an accurate temperature. Record the temperature. The volume of the measure can now be calculated. Now, to determine the density, fill the measure with 1/3 of aggregate and level the surface with your fingers. Rod the layer of aggregate 25 strokes of the tamping rod evenly distributed over the surface. Add additional aggregate to the measure to 2/3 full level. Level with your fingers and rod again with 25 strokes of the tamping rod. Finally, add additional aggregate to overflowing and rod again with 25 strokes of the tamping rod. Once you have completed the 25 strokes on the last layer, you will want to evenly level the edge so it is flush with the top of the measure. Once again, you're going to weigh the measure full of aggregate. Record the weight, and now the density of the aggregate can be calculated based on this weight divided by the volume of the measure. Part 3, Relative Density and Absorption of Coarse Aggregate. A few terms that you will need to know: oven dry, air dry, and saturated surface dry, or SSD. Thoroughly mix the sample and reduce it to the approximate sample weight needed. Reject material passing the 5 mm sieve. The The maximum test sample should be 3 kilograms for aggregate, nominal max size of 20 millimeters. Place the aggregate in the oven for a period of 1 to 3 hours at 110 degrees Celsius. Ensure that the mix has cooled down to the ambient room temperatures before recording the weight. Next, you want to wash the sample thoroughly to remove dust and any other coating on the material. Do not lose any of the aggregate in this process, for this will be detrimental to the experiment. Weigh the submerged empty mesh basket by placing the handle to the hook on the bottom of the scale. Record the weight to its nearest 0.5 grams. Fill the mesh basket with the aggregate and immerse it in water for a period of 24 hours to ensure that all the voids are filled with water. Weigh the sample and mesh basket by hooking it to the bottom of the scale. Ensure that the basket is not hitting the side of the bucket prior to weighing. The temperature of the water should also be 23 degrees Celsius plus or minus 2 degrees. Record the weight when finished. Remove the sample from the water and roll it onto a large absorbent cloth until all visible films of water are removed. Wipe large particles individually. Dry the aggregate until it is saturated surface dry. Weigh the saturated surface dry aggregate and record the weight. Place the sample in a labeled pan and place in the oven for a period of 24 hours at a temperature of 110 degrees Celsius. After 24 hours, take the sample from the oven and let it cool in air at room temperature, then weigh it to the nearest 0.5 degrees. After this is done, the bulk dry specific gravity, bulk SSD specific gravity, apparent specific gravity, and absorption capacity can all be calculated.